Miguel. Welcome to HealthTech with Purpose.
Right.
See, Miguel, before we move ahead and learn more about you and your company, I would just like to understand, a quick background of yours, and get a quick intro from your end.
No, so yeah, in a quick way, so I'm a biomedical engineer, or as a background that starts studying already doing the masters and move into doing a PhD on how to regulate innovation. So how you could make sure that you bring innovation into patients, into people, especially in healthcare, when you are dealing with innovation, because there is here regulatory fundamentals of bringing something that is safe and its quality does what it means it does. But often we face the challenge of not being able to have all the evidence ahead. And this has been my interests from early days on how to move technology into the markets when you are dealing with risk that you cannot assess fully. You need to live with it. I think the best example we had of this challenge was the vaccine for COVID that was brought to market in 6 months, um, with a lot of uncertainties. But in a nutshell, if you waited more 2 years or 3 years or 10 years when how certain medicines take, how many people have died without the vaccine? So this is the balance that's I'm always interested. And based on this, I've been working several years in digital health fields, creating my own startups, working in ecosystems, so in incubators and accelerators in Europe, working with big companies on helping them to design business models. And more recently, I founded Compliar, that is focused on supporting companies to comply with the regulations that cover software as a medical device, both in Europe, US, all around the world. And my role is of Chief Innovation Officer, so I'm mostly concerned on the impact of the changes that are happening, how we connect that with the changes that are happening on technology, and at the same time helping to build a digital platform on our back that supports this work that we mostly do now as consultants, but we always say want to get rid of consultants and automatize most of things because to help to reduce the burden and the cost of compliance to make it more accessible. So this is in a nutshell my background and what I do.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. And moving ahead, would like to know a little bit more about what Complear is doing, and maybe, if you could help everybody understand a little bit more in depth about Complear, that would help.
Yes. So uh, we our team we started working on the regulatory compliance teams of digital health companies, and we found out that there's a big challenge of a lot of things being updated, being discussed, how to do things, and at the same time we are stuck inside a single company, learning a lot, but only being able to apply to a single situation. So we decided to move out of the companies and focus on how can we automate many of the tasks that we're doing um, internally in those companies that were kind of manual still. And how could we connect that with access to the most updated information so you don't need to be an expert in everything to be able to run your business and build your products. Similar to for you don't need to be an accountant or a lawyer to comply with the law when you have a company, but you have experts that are working on what is happening, the changes, and guiding you through the process. What we want is to make sure that this becomes as more automated and digital as possible. And this has been our focus on building this platform at Compliar. But at the same time, since we are being focused on digital health and software, we came across a situation where many of the people are not familiar on how to build software and digital health products and the compliance part of it. So we start having a lot of requests, especially in the Portuguese ecosystem, but we are working with companies from Romania, Italy, Estonia, US, UK that face the same challenges that are used. Some of them are used to the more traditional medical devices, but when it comes down to software, um, it's something they are not so much aware because a lot of the players in the market they come from a more pharmaceutical backgrounds, less from the engineering. So we start working with many companies in a more one-to-one relationship where we discuss the product, we help them to design the product, we help them to build the products in a compliant way. And this has been a lot of the activities that we've been doing at Compliar in these two verticals. Although, as I told you in the beginning, our goal is to kill the consultants in the sense avoid that the consultant needs to do the repetitive work and supporting the basic things and leave it to work on the expert parts on the topics that you really need to put your minds together. How do I design this? How do I collect evidence for this? The really challenging parts that especially now AI is bringing us. Um,
Amazing, amazing. So, you mentioned you have built a platform, right? Can you give us an example or how a user or somebody who's building a product would, how Complear would help them? Do they have to, answer certain questions on the platform and then, it goes from there? So, if you can explain a bit, that would be
yeah.
really great.
No, the traditional way you do a medical device, imagine that you're doing this is a factory, and you need to keep records of how people in the floor are building that products like a prosthetics or pacemaker, like how they're going to assemble it, what is the design, what will be the components, how do you choose the components that will be using, and then when it comes out of the factory floor, you need to check the quality to make sure it works, and so on. And this is the basics of usually was a medical device. When we come to a software, the factory often is all inside your computer. Uh, the manufacturing is the same time what you are doing as a design because there is not this producing 1000 units is the same codes, is the same basis.
Yep.
So what we help is to make sure that you compile all the information about the design and the development, what the user wants, what do you decide to do as specification, where is it in the codes, so you can keep tracing everything. So eventually, if something fails, it's easier for you to go back and understands what was poorly what you need to improve, what you need to fix. And the challenge is after having this mapping, you need to collect that in the technical documentation that you'll submit to the regulatory authorities. And moving into that is something that if you're building a pacemaker that will be in the market for 20 years, it's something that takes time to do it once. But you know much better than me doing software that's you are releasing a new product, let's say every 2 weeks, probably, and you need to keep a lot of this documentation updated. And that becomes a nightmare if you do it the old way, factory way, that was paper. Today, a lot of people already use Google Docs or SharePoint, and they have online documents, but they're still paper-based in the sense that if you change something in one document, you need to then update it in another document. We are speaking about the pile of 1 meter some of the times of paper if you print it. So imagine that a
Yeah.
lot of people just spend their time uh, updating versions of products across documents or updating titles of requirements across documents that is not any does not bring any value to you. So when we bring that into a digital platform where everything is connected, the information in different parts are related with each other, it makes much easier when you update something, you know that every part that is connected with that is fully updated, and that is the experience. That is what people get when they use our tool. What we are bringing on top of that is the challenge that many of our clients are building a medical device for the first time. So when we ask
Mhm.
them to list risks that they that may be related with their products, they tend to be quite naive or quite basic on the things they list. So our goal is how can you use AI on learning what their product is because they already fill out a lot of information about it, and suggest things that are related with their product that we know that other similar products or in the area are known risks, things that may be relevant, so we can improve the quality of people products because we bring these insights that often are only accessible for people already experts in the fields, and with this way lowering the thresholds of you having a really true and thought analysis of a good design and development without needing to rely in big experts uh, I've been building medical devices for years and can quickly do it and more easily do it. So we can lower the threshold of access of good practice, um, good thinking on medical devices, on software, using these AI components that enhances and enrich what you've been doing and filling out. So in the end, the goal is for you to having a documentation that you can maintain and keep during the lifetime of your product, but at the same time, an easy way of submitting those documentations to competent authorities and regulatory authorities so you get FDA approval, CE marking, other kind of approvals that you need around the world for a medical device to be legally sold into the market.
Awesome, awesome. Sounds very, very interesting. And I think as I said, it's with all the software and hardware catching each other and technology enhancing, it is probably the need of the day to simplify some of these compliance side of things so that there is a little bit more clarity on how to go about these aspects, right? So you mentioned about AI, right, which is pretty interesting. So I would like to understand your take on generative AI in healthcare, and any. So first of all, what do you feel about generative AI, especially when it comes to healthcare? And then we will talk about certain challenges and opportunities around it.
No, as we start to work in software and digital health, our main focus has been quite around AI. AI in the sense that typically when we look into the software, um, um, in medical devices, you are looking to small calculators or basic algorithms that you could assess. That's 1 + 1 equal to 2, and this is the basic of being compliant. You need to show that if you say that you are a calculator that takes 1 + 1 and gives 2, you need to show that it really works. The challenge when you bring AI is that you're saying that okay, you give me your age, your genetics information, um, your blood sample results, and it give you the risk of you having this disease. Um, and this goes often beyond the simple if this and that or basic calculations,
Yeah.
and it becomes really tricky on making sure that when you use especially neural networks or more advanced AI setups, that you can guarantee to a regulatory agency that when you have these inputs, you'll have these outputs, and you could validate that those outputs, that risk is something really not only valid, and you have this efficacy of the results, but you have a consistency that you will not just say to someone a wrong result that can lead to someone harm. This has been the challenge of AI, with let's say machine learning. You have usually this part of you trained an algorithm, then you just test that algorithm. So it's not too different from you having a new material that you came out. Now you're going to do all the tests to that material to make sure it does not break, that it holds off, but it stays usually that way. When you want to improve your algorithm, you have more data, you need to retrain your AI. You again, you do it all again. So you try to you develop the new algorithm, you test it again, you show that it still behaves like it was supposed to behave, like the other, and you release a new version of that product. We start having the frontiers of this is the continuous learning. That's because what I described today, and for instance in Europe, this is manual. So there is no
Yes.
continuous AI. You need to retrain the model, submit the model to a human person to see it. What FDA start doing, and together with the UK exploring, is how can this work in a continuous way. So they move the regulatory scope to validating what is the outcome of the algorithm, to making sure that you have a process that is robust to catch anything that happens out of the software. So they will make sure that you can auto-regulate yourself. So you have a development process with good manufacturing, good machine learning practice, like the FDA calls, that allow you to iterate through the algorithm, but still it requires to have a human person to check in the middle, but no longer they will require you to submit everything to a regulatory agency along the way. The challenge with generative AI is totally is totally a black box, and it's really hard to make sure that what you put as inputs will have a consistent output.
Yeah.
Um, and that is a big hurdle for regulatory wise, because at the same time you have released the capability of AI as a at the level that is amazing. So it becomes so easy for anyone to build a solution where you can book an appointment speaking with someone that's almost seem a human, and it gets booked without need to covering a lot of things, because it translates this information to you. But at the same time, booking an appointment is something that is low risk if it gets misbooked. But if you are asking ChatGPT, for instance, okay, I have these symptoms, what is my disease? and and it's really hard for doctors to check if that connections between inputs and outputs are really uh, well thought. And at the same time, the regulators cannot just come and see if that connections were really well connected and robust, making sure if you speak with 10 people with the flu, that's it will give the right answer to that people, and not say to two of them you have cancer, or
Yeah.
just say to people that have cancer, you don't have anything, you don't need to go to the hospital. Then it becomes a really hard challenge. Um,
Yeah.
that and and now patients are seeing more and more the potential. Doctors are seeing more the potential of AI. It's not just a risk score there. It's something that really can help and replace a lot of the work, but at the same time, um, a challenge that we don't know how to make sure that the quality, the safety, and the security will be there all the time. And it comes down to the challenge I brought you in the beginning, the vaccines. We are in the point that we cannot assure that everything will work. So it will be
Yep.
interesting to start discussing how can we make sure that it's used, but we can control in a way. If we really see that is not behaving properly, we can act quickly, and so quickly that probably one person get harmed and not millions of people, because
Yes.
and this is the tricky part that change the mentality, change the way of we try to get approval of things, making sure everything is okay. But there is a moment that we stop innovation from happening, that we will not bring this to people, or we need to change the way we are more checking if things are working properly than just avoid uh, things to happen. But this will be a challenge of the next years of dealing with this, because either you want or not, people will be using generative AI in healthcare. They will be pushing for it. There is a need for it, and doctors and hospitals and patients will say, "I prefer to risk it uh, than not using it." Um, so it's really important for people to be aware of the risk more than just protect them for the risk. So this is some of the challenges and the things that we are passionate about on building the future, because we don't have answers. Nobody have answers, but we need to work together, because this will happen. Generative AI will happen, and is pushing AI
Yes.
to the forefront of healthcare more quickly than we are expecting.
Yeah, yeah, and there's something a lot of buzz around responsible AI when we talk about generative AI or AI in general in healthcare, right? I think one of the things that's kind of catching around is responsible AI, wherein probably it still needs a little bit of manual intervention because as you rightly said, like things are kind of moving up and nobody knows how it's gonna go. But so what's your take on it? And do you feel is it too early to be used with patients? What's your take on that?
Um, for what we have today, it's generative AI. Is too early
Yeah.
with patients. We've been seeing a lot of discussion. How I always give this example of appointments. Th- Those kind of things, I think, are simple things that generative AI can lower so much the cost in healthcare of replacing bureaucratic work that is done now in hospitals. And if you look into the US, that is usually a reference market, just processing claims for insurance. This is something
Yeah.
that is low risk for patients, so you are not killing
Yes.
someone. Um, so is where we'll see the AI being more used early days. When it comes to help to treat, help to diagnose, is areas where we really need to make sure that who is using understand the limitations, um, and we start developing technology that helps us to make sure that things really work. Um, um, this is usually the way you come up with technology really has of time on certain things, but then you need to spend 10 years making sure that it works. Um, I started working in my career with cell therapies, so how you could use cells to have the functionalities of a medicine. And the big hurdles
Interesting.
in the industry was you are injecting cells inside the human body. You see something happening, so someone improves their healthcare, but you have no clue where the cells were going.
Yeah.
Right? Did they exit the body? Did they were destroyed in the process? Are they going to the brain and develop a cancer tumor in 10 years? And this is interesting. Is a good example. Or the technology was there. The challenges is to develop the technology that will help us to understand what is happening. How could we control things? A lot of the future will be now around generative AI, and you're speaking about responsible AI. What is the technologies? What will be the tools that will help us to make sure that um, what we develop com- fits on our values, on what we deem as safe, what we deem as ethical, and so on, because the requirements are there. In Europe, we are moving into an AI Act that will require any AI to connect to the sources, to avoid
Oh,
bias,
nice.
to show that you account for bias. That may be a simple thing, but we see AI being using for cancer diagnosis in the skin. Something is not yet generative AI, but basic things. that is discriminates against the skin color of the person because it was built on top of a database of white male people in the US.
Yeah.
And what you will be seeing more and more is forcing you to show that you really take into account the diversity of the population, that you really consider that not everyone has a white uh, skin.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure that result is tailor made for the population. At the same time, it does not discriminate people because you could simply say, okay, this is a tool only for diagnosing a skin cancer in white uh, in white people, but that is also
Yeah.
unethical. That you have a part of the population that can benefit from AI and others that cannot benefit. So this is a little bit the struggle, and what usually I say, the challenge with AI is so easy to build. You can have a kids in the university that just do a project that that will be a high complex medical device if you think so, but you can do it in a project in a course. But at the same time, the challenge is making sure that it's built correctly. It will cost much more money than probably the cost of building it in first place. And that's the challenge with
Yep.
software. It's more easy to build it, and then making sure it works properly. And that's why it's important to work
Yes.
with companies that are experts on things, that know what they're doing, that have a lot of this expertise in house, than just working with someone that just give you the best rate to develop codes. And then that's why it's nice to see companies like you that's really focus on software because in healthcare, because you bring a lot of knowledge of different projects, how to build it, that you can bring as expertise to other projects. And this is really valuable in the market. It costs more, but we need to acknowledge uh, that building code for healthcare is not just building the codes, is everything that is
Yes.
around that.
Yes. No, totally agree. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. I think those are some really important points that needs to be considered. When we are talking about the usage of the latest or the new tech, especially generative AI. And I think those are some really great points. I would like to understand. So, how did you generate interest on the healthcare and technology side of things, like combining both of them? Would love to understand a bit more on that.
As I told in the beginning, I'm a biomedical engineer. So my interest, I was about to become a doctor and go study medicine. But when I start thinking what I would like to do, um, I want to build uh, m- machines or software that helps to help people, not necessarily to be the one speaking and taking care of people as doctors do. So that's why I understood, okay, let's go to biomedical engineering. And then I start developing during the course more than a technical interest, an interest more around management, building companies, taking products into the market, so the innovation components. Um, and I really got uh, interesting on the challenges that is bringing something into the market in healthcare. It's not because you are saving persons that you will have a business. It's not because you can build it that someone will use it. And you have just a tricky ecosystem and business models and how it works that for me is quite challenging intellectually. I even had a detour into the blockchain space. So I was part of the first initial coin offer that we did that was done here in Portugal, building PayPal for cryptocurrencies. So something that, let's just say, quite basic, quite a good
Oh,
business in the end, but basic in the technology wise, basic in the business model. So I decided eventually, okay, let's come back to healthcare. I'm missing the challenges of trying to figure out how can I bring something that I know patients want, doctors want, but still I need to come up with a business model that fits the way payers want to pay for it. The
Yeah.
same way I know that the AI works, that I can diagnose people, but I still need to work in a way that I make sure that um, I do it in a way that is safe and is in quality. So the challenge of engineering and business collecting these topics for me are much more interesting in healthcare than in other areas, and that's the passion of working in healthcare. Then of course you all have always the impact of people, seeing how technology really can change people's life, and the challenge of how can we promote adoption of technology. We are now today bringing technology that we are already working 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, and that's why I say with generative AI, the challenge of generative AI is that it becomes so accessible today that we are rushing it into healthcare, in many areas where traditionally this technology will take 20 years to mature to be able to reach patients. We are still discussing about telemedicine. We discussed telemedicine during the COVID times, and we have been doing telemedicine for 20, 30 years, right? We are,
It probably came to limelight during COVID.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the point. Adoption of technology in healthcare is the biggest challenge.
Yes.
Um, and both because you need to make sure that things really work. I usually compare healthcare with aviation. The time it takes something to enter airplane, it takes time because you don't want to test
Yeah.
while in flight. You can do it in cars, probably. It's much easier. Like if your car just break down, I just see the other day a battery of a electric car that just fall off of the car. Okay, who died? Probably no one. But if you have a motor of an airplane that just falls down, you don't want to play with technology there. So that's why the adoption of technology often takes time in healthcare in other areas. You don't want to test things with patients with people life patients life. So it's
Yes.
always important to take this into consideration, but at the same time innovation is there. So either you adopt and are able to promote adoption quicker in the safest way, or you will see a lot of things uh, in the market that are not quality or safe, and people don't understand the difference.
Yeah, yeah. No, and that's a very valid analogy. That and I was gonna talk about barriers to adopting these technologies in healthcare, right? And you mentioned one of the things is we have to be really, really careful and take all the measures before we actually implement, and rushing things won't help because you never know how things are going to turn out, right? Which is probably one of the biggest barriers when it comes to healthcare and adopting new technologies.
No, I'll even add on barriers that when you bring new technologies, new tools, and a lot around digital health and digital tools, feels that you are quite experts in. As I said, the challenge is never the technology. You are in the process of changing a culture. You're changing procedures. So you need to change an organization how they did it, and you have the challenge of um, doctors still today in many places they are not taught how to deal with technology. They are taught how to prescribe a medicine, but they are not taught how to prescribe an additional health app or to speak with an AI system and understand its limitations, understand to differentiate what is good or what is bad. They know how to do it for a medicine. They don't know how to do it with technology. So when you bring new technology to the hospitals, naturally you have a group of people that are not familiar how to deal with these technologies. So they will push back. And one of the mistakes that we often see um, with companies, but also with hospitals or other players bringing technology inside, is that they budget the cost for the technology, but they don't budget the cost of teaching, educating people, promoting adoption,
Yeah,
and this is the biggest barrier, uh, because unless you really educate people, and show them how they can trust what they are using as technology and how to deal with that, will be really hard for many of the technologies to really scale up. We saw startups on thing like 1 week, um, working with a clinic. This is really amazing technology, will help us to support much more patients, doing telemonitoring, tele rehabilitation, and so on. But then they leave the clinic, it gets stuck in the closets because
yeah,
people go back to how they do things before. Is They are dealing with people's lives, so they are even more prone to do things how they did it before because it's what they feel comfortable that will work, or at least they can control. So it becomes really challenging, and we are seeing more and more companies skipping the traditional health hospitals or the traditional clinics and building their own kind of service providers. So there is a big fear now in the US. How Amazon or Google, they are not skipping the hospitals. They stopped trying to work with the hospitals. They are now starting providing directly service to patients, to people, or embedding their own healthcare professionals in their service that know how to do and work with technology. Because then the cost of adoption is much lower, and they can sell directly to who can benefit. And these some trends that we'll see as barriers, because when you try to bring into traditional healthcare, you'll face these barriers.
yeah.
If you try to build it on your own, the payment system is not necessarily tailored for what you are building, and this is a tricky challenge of barriers for digital health, for technology that goes beyond what healthcare professionals are used to work and deal with.
Interesting. Yeah, really, really interesting. So, from barriers to opportunities. So, I would like to understand what do you feel, what are the future opportunities, especially in health tech and overall innovation related to health tech?
As I shared with you, there is a lot of things that AI and digital health can automate, even in the bureaucratic management of healthcare. We have now healthcare professionals spending too much time doing things um, on that side that while they could supporting patients. Um, a fact that we need to understand is we have a population that is getting older and older. Because of that, more and more people get more and more diseases because they live longer. At the same time, um, more you have many countries that are getting more access to healthcare, so it means that you even need more professionals to support. And the truth is that you cannot have more professionals at the pace you need them.
Yeah,
So the only way we can have a sustainable healthcare system, the only way we can pay for it, is to use technology to scale things.
amazing.
So
Yeah,
this is the opportunity we need to focus. We can start in the low hanging fruits, like I was saying, booking appointments, uh, processing insurance claims, a lot of things that are manually done. And how can we focus the work of those people in the work with patients? Um, I see a future where AI will be guiding the doctor on what needs to be done. Um, so you can have much more access to healthcare, but still have access to the doctor. Because if you're just hoping to have a doctor for each person, you'll never be there. We tried in Portugal to have a doctor a general practitioner doctor for each person. We budgeted as a government. In the last years, we had less people with doctor than we had before, and the goal was to everyone to have a doctor. It was not because of the lack of the money. It's because we don't have enough doctors. We could not recruit the doctors needed, and that's a challenge. We need to understand that we cannot still do things how we did 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Is not sustainable. We need to embrace technology to scale as much as much things as possible, and that's how we can make healthcare more accessible. Um, either other way, we will not have enough people to support the needs of both population that's getting older and older, at the same time, um, the majority of the population in the world that are becoming less poor, let's say, or richer. So they now want healthcare. They now want to access healthcare. They now can access healthcare, but we don't have professionals to provide it to
Yeah,
them. So we need to scale it definitely in some way. The tricky is will we see technology being more adopted um, in US, in Europe, when we have already pretty established healthcare systems, or start seeing digital health becoming a way of delivering healthcare in South America, in Africa, in Asia, in other countries that are building healthcare systems from scratch many of the times. So they have the opportunity of not changing things, but building things in a new way. So these are opportunities that we need to look into for technology, because in the end, this is all about people. This is all about change. I
yep.
started an engineer, and my work now is dealing with people. How I convince people to change, how I help organizations to change, so they can adopt technology.
Yeah, yeah. No, amazing. And again, thank you for sharing your input. So my final question, is so what's next for Complear and as you scale, what impact do you think it'll create in the health tech or healthcare space?
The same rationale that I was telling you about the lack of medical professionals for healthcare, we are facing that in the regulatory space for medical devices. So Europe just asked for a lot more evidence and requirements. We are having now AI being regulated, so the cost of developing something is increasing. At the same time, we see a trend in healthcare of decreasing the costs because we cannot pay for innovation at such high price as we were paying before. And at the same time, you need much more people to do this kind of work. So we are in this kind of bottleneck also in the regulatory sides. That is either we have more people, hospitals pay more for technology, so we make sure that all the compliance and checks were done properly, or we find a way to automate things, digitize things, and making sure that the same person that was doing this before can now comply with all the new requirements, all the new legislation that is coming, and we only see that way on enhancing and digitizing the most of the work that they are doing. And this is our mission as Compliar on what what many of the touch points that are burden for companies to comply, um, can we take on so they can focus on the more higher expertise that is needed, but the basics are as fluid as possible. We see as Compliar a vision where you can submit things to enter FDA, if, and then you want to go to India or to China, and you can click in a button. It gives you, okay, we already prepared the submission for China. There's still some missing things
Nice.
that you need to complete from your sites, that we don't have, that we cannot use things that already have. You fill it down, and one day you are submitting something to China, something that probably will take you 3 months, a new team of
Yeah.
consultants, and so on to do so, to make it widely available. And this is a vision we are seeing as a future for us Compliar. How can we scale as much as possible, to cover the burdens of the team, because we are seeing something is companies are not being able to hire more people to do the compliance. So either we help those people to focus on the challenging parts of their technology and their compliance, their evidence collection, and take away the rest of the burden, or what we'll see is that they will not be doing what they should be doing, and that will have an impacts on having products that are not compliant and secure in the markets, um, lack of quality of things, or they become so expensive that in the end nobody is going to pay for it, even if they are helping people. And we are seeing this already in Europe. Many companies, they are deciding we will not certify, we will not adapt to the new regulations certain products because they don't generate enough money for us to justify it. What we call orphan medical devices. So medical devices that are only for 1,000, 2,000 people in Europe because it addresses specific need, a specific disease. But there is no business case for 2,000 people often, and healthcare is not willing to pay for that. So how can we help on reduce so much the cost of burden of regulatory compliance that these products do not need to go out of the market? So this is what we want to build in the future and contribute in the future as Compliar and as a platform tool for increasing number of technologies, especially on digital health and software. This is what is booming now in the fields.
Amazing. So, all the best with that vision, Miguel. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you for sharing your thoughts on generative AI and other technologies and the barriers to use them in healthcare and opportunities related to the same. I think it was a wonderful conversation. I hope everybody else who's watching this has enjoyed it as well. And thank you, and would love to stay in touch.
No, thank you for the invite.